America.
Welcome to the Costa Mesa Pettis Perspective. My name is Jeff Pettis, and this is episode 32. And thanks for watching as usual. And please do me a favor, if you can think about it or have a second, please click the subscribe button below, like it. Helps us track the algorithm for these videos to make sure we can get to who we need to be getting to and tracking who we need to track. So tonight what we're going to be talking about is the City Council meeting from yesterday, the 7th of June. Filming this on the 8th, the day after. And what I'm going to be specifically focusing on is the item, the new, I think it was under new business, the last item, which was a resolution of the City Council of the City of Costa Mesa supporting H.R. 8 to require background checks for gun sales. And what I want to say before getting into this is I speak about this subject with the utmost heavy heart regarding the 19 children that perished in the Texas shooting recently. And I have an 8-year-old daughter. I have 2 big daughters as well that both went to Newport Harbor. My little one goes to Newport Heights Elementary. So I am with all the parents, and I feel I feel the pain of these parents. So what I don't want to do when talking about this subject is to minimize that. So, and what I'm going to do in talking about H.R. 8 is I'm going to try and keep this. It's a difficult thing for all parties to do, including myself, when we're talking about emotionally charged issues related to government, guns, and many other issues. I'm going to try and not rabbit trail off onto a discussion about other issues involving gun control or the Second Amendment. I'm going to try and keep it focused, and my mission is to keep my comments focused specifically to the matter at hand as addressed by the City Council as it relates to H.R. 8 and the issues they were talking about. So that is my mission. Everybody knows where I stand on gun control and gun rights. Yes, I am a proud board member of Orange County Gun Owners PAC, and I'm speaking as a citizen as well as a board member of the PAC. And what I'd like to do first, though, is talk about H.R. 8. It's important there is so much misinformation out there regarding legislation, and in this particular case, H.R. 8 is referring to, in other words, universal background checks, which we've all heard talked about many times. It's brought up in the news, it's thrown around, and it's important to get it on the record, or for our purposes, to be crystal clear on what exactly they're talking about. So H.R. 8 came up a year ago in the House, was passed in the House, and it was not passed. It was put on hold in the Senate, and it's now being talked about again to be brought up in the Senate. And what universal background checks means, if you were to buy a firearm right now, if you were to walk into a gun store and you wanted to purchase a firearm in any state, you're going to have to go through the NICS system, which is a background check system through the FBI. There are differences in states in terms of waiting periods and whatnot, but if you're going to buy a firearm in the United States at a licensed federal, they call it an FFL. It's just basically if you're an FFL gun store or other that holds an FFL, to buy a gun, you're going to have to go through a background check, period. Now, there is in this state, what they're talking about, generally speaking, for the country on H.R. 8 is when they say they want to make universal background checks universal. What that means is they want to make, if I'm going to loan my gun to a friend to go to the range to shoot, just want to loan it to him for the day, my friend, that's the transfer. I'm transferring my gun to him. The H.R. 8 seeks to make that a background checkable action too. So I loan my gun to my friend. As it sits right now, if I know that my friend is not a prohibited owner, meaning not everybody can own a gun, then I can loan him the gun. He can go to the range. H.R. 8 seeks to say if I want to loan my gun to my friend who's got it, we have to both go to an FFL, pay the money, do a background check. He can take my gun to the range. We transfer him to go shoot. He wants to give it back to me. We have to go back to the FFL, pay the money, do a background check on me, and transfer the gun back to me. That would also include, I want to, a friend has a son who wants to take deer hunting. The son doesn't have a deer rifle. My daughter's deer rifle no longer fits her. I'm willing to loan them the deer rifle to go on a hunting trip with the father. The daughter would need to go to a FFL. I would have to go with them to the FFL, transfer it, pay for it, do a background check. So loaning, that's called a private transfer of a gun. And in some states, it is legal to sell a gun privately without going to an FFL and doing a background check. In those states, it would also you would have to have a background check to do a private sale. So basically, universal background checks, you already have to get a background check if you're normally buying a gun. But if H.R. 8 passed, it would basically be criminalizing loaning or transferring a gun to anybody. There are a couple exceptions in there. I think a spouse, a parent, things like that. It's criminalizing transferring. It's also, there's some misconceptions about, already are in this state. Now let's talk about California in general. There already are universal background checks. And what I mean by that is it's already illegal to sell a gun to somebody and not do a background check. So if I was to take my handgun, I wanted to sell it to my friend Bob privately, him and I would have to meet at the gun store, do the background check, transfer the firearm to him, and he could then buy the firearm for me. So California already has universal background checks, and that goes for gun shows as well. And for the record, we don't have gun shows here anymore anyway. So basically, H.R. 8 seeks to make universal background checks law, meaning it criminalizes the private transfer of firearms. That's what universal background checks are. Now, the issue with that, and the one thing that I'm going to say, the reason that is a problem when you're thinking constitutionally is that there is no way, let's say H.R. 8 passes, great, everything's done, universal background checks are in place. Now, how is that going to be enforced? There is no enforcement mechanism for the FBI to enforce that would prevent somebody from using that gun to do a crime. And what do I mean by that? The answer to that is, in order to enforce that, to make it a preventative, not a retrospective action, but a preventative mechanism, they would have to have a gun registry, a national gun registry. And that means they would have to have the ability in law randomly at notice, be able to take this, to be able to enforce, if they want to know if somebody still has their gun, I still have all my guns that I say I have, they need to be able to look, how many guns does Jeff Pettis have? I'm going to randomly go check him to make sure he hasn't sold any of them without doing background checks. That's the only way to enforce universal background checks. So it's already Second Amendment. We're wanting to trample on the Second Amendment already with the universal background check idea. And then you get into a Fourth Amendment violation of illegal search and seizure if you were to then, because naturally what's going to happen is, it's not talked about it now if HR passed, but HR would pass, then what would happen inevitably would be they would come back around and say, we need an enforcement mechanism, or this law doesn't make sense. You have to let us do a gun registry. And what does a gun registry do? It makes there's a list that the big federal government would have all the citizens of the United States, all the gun owners, what kind of guns they have, caliber, type, and those of you that are of like mind know what that will lead to is confiscation, which is and this gets into, I'm already starting to do what I promised I wouldn't do, because gun confiscation is the goal of many people that are not believers in the Second Amendment. So that's what we're talking about in H.R. 8. But bringing it back to H.R. 8 specifically, what was going on in council was this resolution. What it is it was the formulation of this. They called it what did Stevens call it? It was they formed a committee, which was Stevens, Marr, Pro Tem Marr, Mayor Stevens, and city manager Lori Farrell Harrison. So this is the committee they formed, and they say they formed this committee. And what this resolution is doing is this committee constructed a letter to be sent to Chuck Schumer in the National House in the United States Senate. And it says, I'll read the first part of it. Dear Schumer, on behalf of the City of Costa Mesa, the City Council writes to express our support for H.R. 8, the Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2021. And the City of Costa Mesa, along with the nation, grieves the countless lives lost to gun violence. Families are forever and irreparably shattered by senseless loss of their children and loved ones due to the current failure to require background checks of private gun sales and transfers. Now, the issue I have is we can have a discussion about gun control. We know that there's a lot of bipartisan agreement that something needs to be done. We're not going to get into all those different things right now, but in this issue alone, this council is sending a letter on behalf of the citizens of Costa Mesa, and the point they're making is not accurate. It's a lie. It's false. They are saying that families are forever and irreparably shattered by senseless loss of their children and loved ones due to the current failure to require background checks of private gun sales and transfers. Now, H.R. 8, if that was law right now, would have done nothing to stop the shooter in Texas. He went to the store, passed a background check, purchased $3,000 worth of high-end rifle, Daniel Defense, and several hundred rounds of ammunition, passed a background check, and committed the atrocities he did. H.R. 8 would have not prevented him from doing that. And if you read the staff report also, the committee that was formed claims to have done research to back up the claim that they're making here that H.R. 8 would have prevented this tragedy. And they cited the New York shooting. They cited the obviously the Uvalde, Texas one, Buffalo, New York shooting, and Laguna Woods shooting, and then they go into background checks and gun show purchases. So like I said, none of those shootings, in fact, would have been prevented by H.R. 8. And they also talk about gun shows, which we no longer have in the city of Costa Mesa. So the claims they're making to support the claim they're making in this letter are erroneous at best and outright dishonest. And they're speaking on behalf of the citizens of Costa Mesa and the council. And that is where I have an issue. If you're going to make a claim like that and you're going to send a letter on behalf of this city and this council to the United States Senate Majority Leader Schumer, and you're going to make a claim that H.R. 8 would have prevented these crimes, what that tells me is the people that came up with this letter aren't interested in preventing crime. They're interested in virtue signaling, using the emotional tragedy of the current events to make a political point, and that is where I have an issue. And if you're going to make a point, first of all, make sure it's honest. Make sure you do your research, because if you watch the city council meeting and Don Harper Don Harper reached out to the community. I was one of the people. I'm going to own it. He didn't mention me by name in the meeting, but there were several other people that submitted emails. Orange County Gun Owners PAC is on record. In the record, you can look it up now, speaking out against this because it's a lie, and they are claiming to have done research, and with some just cursory challenging of their information in the meeting, there was immediate defensiveness. You could tell they were trying to shut down the debate. And again, I want to circle back to the point wasn't that this is a senseless tragedy and we're for violence. Don't use a terrible tragedy like this. Make up things in a letter. Use facts that don't even apply to what you're stating, and put forth as if it's from the citizens, and don't even involve citizen input at all. That's where I have a problem with this. And if we are going to, if I'm going to have faith in my council and my mayor, in my government, I want to make sure that they're telling the truth and they're representing us in a straightforward, stand-up way, and they're not virtue signaling using tragedy to put forward a political agenda. To me, that's gross, disgusting, and despicable, and that should be condemned. Now, if they were to make it, let's change it up a little bit. If they were to do their research and they were to put forth an opinion, or if they were to poll, give the opportunity for the citizens to chime in and say, listen, we are expressing our desire to have a federal law. Again, I'm not a big fan of overreaching federal government, but if they were to ask for to be considered a federal law to harden schools, to put armed security guards at schools, to put surveillance in place, that would actually go far to preventing tragedies like this. Look, we're a gun nation, and guns aren't going to go away. Guns are here, and it's not a defeatist attitude. It's the way it is. And we have the responsibility to protect our kids. And putting forward something like that would be a concrete action, and that would be something that would be defensible and researched and directed. So what I'd like to do, it almost makes me emotional because I think about the children, and I don't like these things being politicized. So in the future, I would ask that the council get their facts straight, tell the truth on documents they're trying to send to the government, federal government on our behalf, and get their act together. I think it's gross. Most importantly, be kind to yourself, be good to each other. Together we can get it done. Bye for now.